Hi everybody, it's Pippin here. You would not believe how many versions of this I have tried recording already. This is definitely going to be the one. This is a video tutorial and demonstration about the important topic of creating a course repository on GitHub. Really, it's about how to create any kind of repository on GitHub, but I'm going to treat it as the more specific thing of creating our course repository. Now, the question of what a repository is and what GitHub is, we'll get used to that over time. But the basic idea is that a repository is a kind of folder that lives on your computer, and it's where you're going to do all of your coursework. So you'll store all of the programming stuff that you do, exercises, assignments, projects, etc., inside this folder called a repository. And you'll also synchronize that folder with the website github.com. And that will enable you to keep your work safe, as well as visible to myself and the TA and other people as desired. So it's a really, really useful piece of software and approach to development. It's also the way that most programmers and developers in the professional world do their work. So knowing how to create a repository and use this thing that's called version control is super important. So that's why we're doing it as well. Okay, so we're going to do this just step by step, and you can follow along as I do these things. The very first thing that we need to do is we need to open our browser. I'm using Google Chrome, but you could use something else. I recommend either using Chrome or Firefox in this course overall because of their developer tools. For right now, it doesn't particularly matter. So we're going to go to github.com, github.com. And we immediately see the login screen, right? Now, if you don't already have a GitHub account, which is potentially quite likely, this is the moment where you would need to sign up for an account, okay? And you can either click on the sign up button here at the top right where my cursor is, or you can fill out this form on the front page and click the big green sign up for GitHub button there. We need an account to continue, so please pause the video if you don't have one and create an account and then come back. It shouldn't take very long. Okay, and now what we're going to do is we're going to sign in to GitHub. So I'm going to click on this sign in button here. It's already auto filled in my username and password, as you might expect from using the internet ever. So I'm going to click the nice green sign in button. Now, when I sign in, I see a lot more information than you probably will if you've only just joined GitHub, just because I have a lot of different projects that I host on this website. As you do more work, this is likely to be your experience as well. Normally speaking, people make one repository for every project that they work on. So you can see down here on the left some of my repositories. There's one called Combat at the Movies, there's one called Chesses 3, there's one called Game Ideas Book, etc. Each one of these is a repository where I do work on a specific project. Most of these are video games that I've been making. We're just going to have one of these repositories that's going to store all of our coursework. So it's like the course is a project that you're working on. Okay, so if we want to create a repository, you can probably look at the screen and guess what you're going to do. You're either going to click this nice green New button, which will create a new repository, or if you want to, you can also click on this plus button at the top right and go to New Repository. Both of those do exactly the same thing. I'm going to click this one. When we create a new repository, it just needs a little bit of information. The main thing, of course, is a name. So we're going to give this repository, or this folder, if you like, a name. And I suggest that you call it Card 253. That's the name of the current course. It makes sense to call your repository that. If you really want to give it a different name, you can. Just make sure that you can remember it. The description is optional, but I'm going to write something in here. Pippin's coursework for Card 253 exclamation mark, because I'm happy. The description doesn't matter too much, but it's nice to get into the habit of adding descriptions just in case somebody else ends up looking at your work and they want to try and get some context. So name, description, We want to make sure that this repository is public, so we make sure that this public radio button is selected. It needs to be public so that your projects can be graded and so that we can see them and do stuff with them. Finally, we do want to click the initialize this repository with a README checkbox. So that should have a tick in it. That will start your repository off with a single file, a README file. README files are extremely useful in any project. There's never really a good reason not to have one. So we've given it a name, a description, it's public, and it will be initialized with a README. We're ready to create the repository. So I click Create. After a beat, we end up on the repository's home screen, right? You can see from the URL in my browser bar, github.com/pipinbar, that's my username, /cart253, the name of the repository. Nice simple URL, which is great. The idea behind a repository, as I said, is it's just kind of like a folder with files and other folders in it. At the moment, because we checked the checkbox, we can see that there's one file. It's called readme.md, and that's the only file in this repository. You can also see that by default, readme.md, this specific file, is being displayed. The actual contents of that file is being displayed on this homepage. That means that this file is kind of special, right? It's a way of showing specific information about your repository that might be useful to yourself or somebody else. You can also see that the description that I added earlier on is in the About section over here. So it was kind of a good thing to do. Gives a little personality to this repository. So one important thing about this repository as it stands right now is that it's only on the website github.com, right? It's nowhere else. So we're going to want to get this repository, this folder, onto our computer. Before we do that, though, I'm just remembering, there's one setting that we would like to change on the repository. So I want you to go to the Settings menu, which is up here, sort of at the top right of this list of menu items for the repository. We'll click on that. And then we're going to scroll down a bit. You can see that there's the sort of usual settings you might expect. You can change the name. You can do all kinds of other interesting things, but let's not worry about that. We're going to keep scrolling down until we get to GitHub Pages. Okay? Now, GitHub Pages is this really great feature that GitHub offers, which is basically just free web hosting. So you can host websites by putting all of the files for the website, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, etc., into a repository, and then you can treat that repository like it's just a website. That's super useful for showing your work to other people, and so we want to enable it. We'll also rely on it for grading in the course. So under the Source section of GitHub Pages, we're going to change it from None, and we're going to select Master, which is the other option that we have right now. Once we select Master, you can also see that it automatically selects root, the /. We're going to leave that and click Save. That has saved. There's a little blue message up here saying GitHub Pages source saved. That's nice. If we scroll down back to the GitHub Pages section of this page, you can see that there's this message here, your site is ready to be published at, and then it gives us a URL that looks just like a standard website address, right? HTTPS, and then pipinbar, which is my GitHub username, .github.io. Notice that this is not .com, it's .io, and then /, and then the name of my repository, cart253. So that will be the base level website address of the websites that we will put inside our course repository. It's very, very convenient. Okay, so we've now got GitHub Pages working, which is great. And we're going to scroll back up to the top of the page. I just want to go back to the home page of cart253. Okay, so at the very top you can see pipinbar, that's my username. If I clicked that, I'd see all of my repositories and so forth. And then cart253 is the specific repository that we're working on. I want to click on that to go back to that kind of home page screen. Okay? So as I was saying before, the main final thing that we don't have going on right now is that we don't actually have this repository on our computer. Right now it only exists on this website called github.com. That's great, but it's not going to be possible for us to really do much work on programming until we have the folder actually on our computer so that we can put files in it and start actually working on projects. So what I want to do is take that extra step, and I want to get the file, the folder that this repository is onto my computer. So to do that, we're going to use the software called GitHub Desktop. I included that in the list of software for this course. It's a sort of easy way of communicating between your computer and github.com. Obviously, as you can tell from the name, it was made by the people from github.com. So you want to run GitHub Desktop. There are lots of ways to run programs on your computer. I'm going to trust that you have some way that you like to do that. On a Mac, I like to use Command spacebar, and then I type the name of the application that I want to use, like GitHub Desktop, and then I can automatically just run it quickly. So I'm going to run GitHub Desktop. Here we go. There it is, GitHub Desktop. Like I said, most of all, it's a piece of software for communicating with github.com and for maintaining this idea of a repository. We'll talk more about it in another video. So in order to get, oh, and I should say, actually, sorry, by the way, when you run GitHub Desktop for the first time, you may well need to log in with your GitHub credentials, right? The username and password that you used when you signed up for GitHub. You'll have to enter those in when you actually run GitHub Desktop. That's so it knows who you are, right? Kind of makes sense. So if you see that login screen when you run it, fill in your username and password and other information it may request, and then you should end up on a screen like this. Again, if it's your first time using GitHub Desktop and GitHub, you'll probably see a much more blank screen. There won't be stuff available because you won't have any repositories yet. So the final step, like I said, is that we want to get this repository onto our computer. To do that, there's lots of different ways to do it. I think that the simplest way is that we go into GitHub Desktop and we do this thing called clone repository. Cloning a repository really just means downloading it from somewhere, okay? Clone is, that's the word that they like to use, but it really means download. So clone repository, I'm going to select that. Because I logged in, just like you did, to GitHub, when I'm cloning a repository, I can select the tab that says github.com, and it will actually list all of the repositories that I have access to, right? And because like I said, I've been running quite a few different projects via GitHub. There's a lot here. You will probably only see one if this is your first time, and that would be your username /cart253, or whatever you called your course repository. And that's the one that we want to clone, right? So we want to select the one that we want to clone, and then the other really important thing is we need to decide where we want this folder to actually go, right? Currently, the default on my computer is that it's going to go into users, bar, desktop, and then the folder called cart253. So it's going to go onto my desktop. That's kind of fine with me, but it may not make sense on your computer. We only need to make this decision once, and we probably should try and avoid moving it afterwards. So choose a location on your computer where you want your cart253 folder to be. It's where you're going to do all of your work. And in fact, now that I'm saying that, I'm going to move it somewhere else. Okay, so I'm going to click this choose button here. And I'm actually going to, on my computer at least, I'm going to go to my home folder. I'm going to go to Dropbox. And then I'm going to, am I going to do this? I'm sorry, I'm dithering right now. This is very human of me. Actually, look, I'll put it in the other classic default position, place that these things go, which is that they go into your home directory, the documents folder. Then I'm going to make a new folder in my documents folder called GitHub, like that. And I'm going to put it in there. Okay? So I'm going to put it inside this GitHub folder. I'm going to click on open. So now you can see it's going to be in users, bar, documents, GitHub, and then it's going to be a folder called cart253. Like I said, it doesn't matter too much where you put it so long as it's somewhere that's useful to you. And just remember, this is the folder you're going to keep returning to do your work. Okay? So I've selected cart253. I've chosen where on my computer I want this folder to be, and then I click clone. It's a very small repository, so it didn't take very long to download. Barely noticed that it was happening. But now in GitHub Desktop, you should see that it says up at the top left, current repository, cart253. It says 0 changed files because nothing has actually changed in our repository. But very importantly, if I go to my Finder, let's just close some folders. Hopefully that wasn't too embarrassing. I'm going to open a window, Wow, this could be really interesting. And I'm going to go to my home folder. By the way, on a Mac, I'm doing that by hitting Command-Shift-H. I'm sure you have your own way of getting to your home folder. And we're going to go to Documents, GitHub. And there, as you can see, is my repository, right? Cart253, it's just like a folder. And inside that folder, there is that one file that we know is created by default, readme.md. So we've gone through the full process now. We have the repository on our computer. So to recap, we basically signed up for github.com if we didn't already have an account with them. We then created a new repository on github.com called cart253. We turned on GitHub Pages so that we can host websites inside our repository for free, which is great. And then we did what is called cloning the repository using GitHub Desktop so that now we have a folder on our computer called cart253, which has the same stuff in it that the version on github.com does. And in another video, we're going to talk about how we keep those two things in sync with one another, and indeed what the point of all of this repository stuff is in the first place. Okay, so that's the end of what I have to say for this video. I hope it was not too intimidating. If you're not used to this kind of thing, remember that we're going to be using these things over and over and over again. So it really does get easier with practice, and it'll become second nature to you, I swear. Okay, so see you next video or in person, whatever happens first. Bye.